All right, good day. My name is Tom Randolph. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about a climate change action plan called the Clean Energy Plan of 2019 for the state of North Carolina. So the history of this action plan really goes back to an executive order made by Governor Roy Cooper back in 2018 called Executive Order 80. Now, among other things, this executive order supports the 2015 Paris Agreement. It calls for a reduction of greenhouse gases below 40% of the 2005 emission levels. It calls for a reduction of greenhouse gases of state-owned buildings by at least 40% of the 2003 levels. It was written by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality under the governor's authority, the DEQ. And at that time, the Secretary of DEQ was Michael Regan, who is now the director of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. And I had the pleasure of meeting him when he was a guest speaker in my class of environmental education at App State University, where he gave out some certificates to some of my students. So the last thing on this list that I have is with the Executive Order 80 is the development of a state clean energy plan, and that's what we're going to talk about. So the plan was developed after a wide range of statewide meetings with stakeholders. These meetings included energy utilities, policymakers, regulators, universities, nonprofits, the public, and industry experts. So they aimed for a transparent discussion. So three main goals of this plan are to reduce electric power sector greenhouse gas emissions by 70% below 2005 levels by 2030 and attain carbon neutrality by 2050, to foster long-term energy affordability and price stability for North Carolina's residents and businesses by modernizing regulatory and planning processes, and to accelerate clean energy innovation, development, and deployment to create economic opportunities for both rural and urban areas of the state. The Clean Energy Plan does also offer timelines, less than 12 months, 1 to 3 years, and 3 to 5 years. It also provides policymakers and regulatory bodies, local governments, an implementation plan for achieving the goals and the targets that are set. And it also requires a detailed analysis for proposing new legislation. So there are some very specific strategies and recommendations. One is to monetize CO2 emissions to meet CO2 emission goals. And we're talking about CO2 emissions from industry, from the coal burning power plants here in the state. Duke Energy runs quite a few of those. We're talking about maybe a cap and trade type program where permits or credits can be purchased. So that's one area. Another area is to develop green energy funds to encourage the expansion of clean energy markets, to connect private capital with clean energy projects, to provide incentives to modernize existing utilities to encourage clean energy, the implementation of legislation based on stakeholder recommendations, again, legislation, to require utilities to provide greater access to solar energy, and also identify and advance legislation and regulatory actions to foster North Carolina's offshore wind energy resources. And remember, we are on the Atlantic Ocean on our eastern coast. The blue bars in Figure 6 show the rise and leveling off of solar installations. Utility projects have determined growth plans, but new policies will examine the needs for increased solar capacity in the coming years in the Clean Energy Plan. As we look a little deeper at the Clean Energy Plan, we see that there are sectors that are being addressed with these strategies. And one sector is transportation. One of the ideas in this, one of the proposals, is to increase zero emission vehicles. The recommendation is to have at least 80,000 zero emission vehicles on North Carolina roads and registered in the state by 2025. So we're talking about electrification, electrifying vehicles, transportation, freight, and also the electrification of buildings as well to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases from the burning of fossil fuels. One of the really interesting kind of pinpointing idea they have is a plan to provide incentives to people who have electric cars to wait to charge their vehicles after the peak load of early evening has passed. So when people are coming home between 5 and say 10 o'clock at night, don't charge your vehicle. Start the charge at maybe 11 o'clock, have it programmed into your computer. And then the state is going to provide incentives to have you do that. So that was kind of an interesting idea to reduce that high peak load for those that are charging their vehicles in the evenings for the next workday. Another specific strategy in the Clean Energy Plan is to begin using more smart energy devices. And these devices are used in residences and also in commercial buildings to control heating and cooling in a more efficient manner. Also, environmental justice concerns are raised in this plan. Concerns about the 30% of North Carolina residents living in poverty. By electrification and bringing more efficient electrification into households, we're going to hopefully see more relief given to the low-income households that are spending a disproportionate amount of their income on heating and cooling, as opposed to the residents that have higher incomes in the state. One of the things I liked about the adaptation plan was the idea of ensuring these new mechanisms are working as intended. And that was an evaluation process needs to be done to make sure that these new processes are actually working. And that kind of reminded me a little bit of the California scoping process that they have every few years to kind of look and see how things are going and what needs to be changed. Also, the plan recommends a performance metrics that measures and tracks data for outcomes of how things are being changed and if the plan is actually working. So what's the progress of the Clean Energy Plan? Well, starting as an executive order, now it has moved through the legislature. A bipartisan agreement was made just this week, and House Bill 951 has passed. So on the new bill is a reduction of greenhouse gases, 70% of 2005 levels by 2030, and carbon neutrality by 2050. Duke Energy and other utilities are required to retire some of their coal plants as well. And also solar energy needs to be purchased from smaller companies by utilities. Well, I hope you enjoyed learning about the Clean Energy Plan, and thank you very much for your attention.